Tonight's story is a quiet winter legend. It is told slowly and meant to be listened to with the lights low and the world at rest. There are no sudden sounds here, no sharp turns, only snow, firelight, and a story that moves as winter does. If you are awake, you may listen. If you grow tired, that is perfectly fine. The story will continue whether you are here for it or not. Now, let the night settle, and let the winter begin. You open your eyes to a winter that has already taken possession of the land. It is not the sort that announces itself with violence or spectacle. There are no howling winds, no sudden storms to mark its arrival. Instead, it has come as winter often does in the high places, quietly, deliberately, settling in piece by piece until resistance seems unnecessary. Snow lies upon the mountains in careful layers, each fall modest in itself, yet together forming a weight that reshapes the world. Paths narrow, sounds soften, distances feel longer than they ought to be. The village sits low among the slopes, a gathering of roofs and chimneys drawn inward against the cold. From above, it might resemble something intentional rather than accidental, as though it were placed there with care, knowing the shape of the land and the temperament of the season. Smoke rises straight into the pale air, thin and steady. Even the wind, it seems, has learned discretion. Winter here has never been merely a time of year. It is a condition, a presence that governs without urgency, setting terms that must be respected if one is to endure. Fires must be tended, food must be measured, people must attend to one another, whether inclination favours it or not. Neglect is rarely forgiven. And yet something has begun to loosen. No one can say when this change first appeared. It did not arrive on a particular morning, nor did it announce itself with clear signs. It made its way quietly, by degrees, the way cold slips through the smallest cracks before it is ever noticed. It begins, as such things often do, with convenience. A child takes more than is proper and is not corrected, because the day has been long and the moment feels too small to pursue. A lie is told and dismissed with a smile, because pressing the matter would require energy that seems better saved. A cruelty passes without remark, not because it is unseen, but because seeing it fully would demand action. Parents grow tired, elders grow cautious. It feels kinder at first to allow these things to pass. After all, winter already asks much of them. Why add to its burden? St. Nicholas continues to come. On this point, nothing has changed. Each year, on the appointed night, lanterns glow warmly behind frost-covered glass. Boots are placed carefully by doors. Children wait with a stillness that belongs only to expectation, listening for what they cannot yet hear. The saint passes through the village without ceremony. He leaves small gifts, modest tokens that carry more meaning than value. They are reminders, not rewards, signs that kindness is observed, that effort is remembered. But kindness, when left to stand alone, has a tendency to lean. The children who behave well receive their gifts. The children who do not behave well receive them also. At first, the distinction feels unimportant. Then it feels theoretical. Eventually, it disappears altogether. What once instructed becomes habitual. What once corrected becomes tradition. Fear diminishes, and fear, when it is diminished too far, leaves behind a space that something else must eventually occupy. The mountains notice this absence. They always have. Snow gathers more thickly along the forest's edge. The days seem to close in earlier than before, though the sun insists it has not changed its course. Bells that once guided travellers through the passes are carried less frequently, not because they are broken, but because their necessity has been forgotten. Paths that were once familiar begin to feel subtly altered, as though they have shifted when no one was watching. The elders sense it first. They speak less by the fire, listening more than they talk. Old stories surface in their thoughts, stories once told with care, later softened, then abbreviated, until their edges were worn smooth. They recognize the feeling, even if they cannot yet name it. On the longest night of that winter, St. Nicholas walks the village as he always has. He moves between houses with the same practiced quiet, his staff leaving shallow marks in the snow that will not last until morning. He pauses at doors, listens, then moves on. Gifts are placed. Warmth lingers briefly, then fades. When dawn comes, the village wakes as usual. And yet, something feels unfinished. The gifts are there, the fires burn, the snow lies undisturbed. But the sense of reassurance that usually follows this night does not settle as it should. It slips away too quickly, leaving behind a faint unease that resists explanation. At the edge of the village, St. Nicholas stops. He looks toward the forest and beyond it, toward the higher slopes where snow gathers in deep, unbroken drifts. He remains there longer than is his habit, listening to a silence that carries more weight than sound. He understands what kindness alone cannot accomplish. He knows what has been neglected. That night, the bells ring in the mountains. They are not village bells, nor do they resemble the clear guiding tones travellers expect. These bells are deeper, slower, as though they are being moved rather than struck. Their sound travels through stone and snow alike, finding its way into dreams and waking thoughts with equal ease. Something has begun to take shape. Not born, but assembled. The mountains draw together what has been overlooked. Fear that was allowed to fade, consequence left unspoken, boundaries softened until they were no longer felt. This fear is not sharp. It does not rage. It is steady, deliberate, and patient. Horns curve into being, shaped like those of the animals that endure where gentler creatures cannot. Hooves press into the snow with unmistakable weight. Chains form not as instruments of harm, but as symbols of burden, forged from broken promises and forgotten warnings. Bells are added last, not to terrify, but to announce. By morning, the storm lifts. The village wakes to a silence so complete it feels almost artificial. Snow lies smooth and untouched, save for a single trail leading from the forest's edge toward the mountains, and stopping there, as though whatever made it chose restraint. Children feel it before they understand it. They move more carefully that day. They pause before small mischiefs that once seemed inconsequential. Adults feel it later, as a quiet pressure that encourages reflection
rather than fear. St. Nicholas does not return the following year. He waits. And in the high forest, something waits as well. Fear has learned to walk, not to punish, but to remind.
Chapter 2. Winter does not relax its hold once it has been acknowledged. It settles more deeply, as though satisfied that it has been understood. Snow no longer arrives as an event, but as a condition, present when one wakes, present when one sleeps, shaping the world through quiet persistence rather than force. The village continues its routines, outwardly unchanged. Fires are lit at the same hours, paths are cleared with the same care. Voices rise and fall in familiar patterns. And yet, beneath these habits, something subtle has shifted, like a weight rediscovered and accepted. The forest above the village feels closer now, not nearer in distance, but in presence. The line where open ground gives way to trees seems more definite, more deliberate, as though it has been drawn with intention. Snow gathers there in heavier drifts. Sound diminishes as one approaches it, absorbed by branches heavy with ice. Beyond that line, the trail remains. It should not. Fresh snow has fallen steadily since its appearance, enough to erase any ordinary mark. Yet the impressions endure, deep, measured, unmistakable. Hooves pressed into frozen ground with purpose, not haste. No one follows them. It is not discussed, but it is understood that some paths exist only to be acknowledged, not taken. Higher still, where the trees thin and the slopes grow steep, the being moves. It does not wander, it does not search. Its movement resembles that of the mountains themselves, slow, restrained, guided by necessity rather than curiosity. Each step is placed where it must be, no more, no less. Its breath rises in steady clouds, dissipating slowly in the cold air. Chains rest against its form with a weight that is felt even in stillness. When they shift, the sound is muted, absorbed quickly by snow and stone. The bells are silent, for now. The being does not look down upon the village as a judge might. Judgment implies decision, and its purpose is not to decide. It carries memory instead, the accumulated understanding of what follows when balance is neglected. It senses disturbance as one senses pressure before a storm. A raised voice not tempered by reflection. A correction withheld out of convenience. A child learning without instruction that consequence is negotiable. These are small things. They always are. On the first night it approaches the edge of the village, snow begins to fall again. Not heavily, not urgently, but with a persistence that muffles sound and blurs edges. Lantern light glows softly through it, contained and uncertain. The being stops short of the boundary. This restraint is deliberate. Some thresholds must be respected, even by those created to enforce them. A child wakes in the early hours, stirred not by noise, but by a sense of attention. The room is dark. The fire has fallen to embers. The cold presses gently at the edges of the blankets. Then comes the sound. A bell, low, distant, singular. It is not loud enough to frighten, nor sharp enough to startle. It simply exists, suspended in the quiet, unmistakable and brief. The child listens until it fades, then lies back down, comforted by something they cannot yet name. In the morning, the sound is already half forgotten, but its effect remains. That day, the child pauses before speaking sharply. gives without being asked. The change is so small it passes unnoticed by everyone else. The being withdraws again into the forest. On the following nights it returns closer. Snow continues to fall, each layer softening the village further, wrapping it in a stillness that feels intentional. The bells sound once each night now, always at a distance, always restrained. Animals stir but do not panic. Dogs lift their heads, then settle again. Horses shift in their stalls, uneasy but calm. The world senses presence without threat. Adults dream of earlier winters, not the gentler ones, but the hard seasons that taught restraint. They wake unsettled, thoughtful, quieter than usual. Words are chosen more carefully. Silence is allowed its place. St. Nicholas watches from beyond the mountains. He does not walk the village streets this year. There is no need. His absence is not neglect, but acknowledgement. He understands that what is unfolding cannot be accomplished through kindness alone. This is not his role. On the coldest night of the season, the being enters the village. Snow falls thick and heavy, blurring the familiar into something almost abstract. Lanterns glow dimly, their light absorbed by swirling white. The bells ring steadily now, not urgently, not loudly, but with a certainty that cannot be ignored. Every sound feels nearer. The being walks the central path without haste. Hooves sink deep into the snow, leaving marks that will remain until morning. Chains sway with slow, deliberate movement. Breath rises and falls with measured regularity. It does not look into windows. It does not approach doors. Its presence alone is sufficient. Children wake and pull blankets closer, hearts quickened but not panicked. Adults stir, sensing something ancient moving just beyond their walls. Fear returns, not sharp or overwhelming, but clarifying, useful, necessary. The being reaches the far edge of the village and stops. The bells ring once more. Then, silence. By morning, the snowfall has eased. The village wakes to a world newly shaped, softened by fresh white. Hoofprints mark the path clearly, leading in and then out again, returning to the forest. No doors are broken, no harm has come, and yet something fundamental has been restored. Voices are calmer, corrections are offered without anger and received without resistance. Children understand limits again, not because they have been threatened, but because those limits have been made real. Fear has returned to its proper place. The being retreats into the forest, its task not complete, but no longer urgent. It will walk again when required. It will wait when it is not. Winter stretches on, but it no longer feels endless. The mountains have answered, and the bells, now still, rest against chain and fir, waiting for the moment they will be needed once more. Chapter 3. Winter settles into its long middle. The urgency that marked its arrival has passed. What remains is endurance, a steady, unbroken presence that shapes days not by drama, but by repetition. Morning arrives pale and subdued. Evening follows early, without ceremony. Snow becomes less an event than a fact, something to be accepted rather than remarked upon. The village adapts, as it always has. Paths are cleared at first light and softened again by afternoon. Fires are fed with practiced economy. Voices find a calmer register, rising less often, lingering more deliberately. And beneath it all, an understanding has taken root. The bells have not rung in many nights. That absence is noted, though it is rarely spoken of. Silence in this case is not neglect, it is confirmation. Above the village, beyond the last reach of lantern light, the forest stands dense and dark. Pines bear the accumulated weight of snow without complaint. Beneath them the ground lies smooth and unmarked, save where one set of tracks remains stubbornly intact. Higher still, where trees thin and stone emerges, the being rests. It moves little now. Motion is unnecessary when balance holds. When it does walk, it does so with the same restraint that governed its creation. No wasted steps, no aimless wandering. Snow closes behind it readily, as though glad to reclaim what was only briefly borrowed. The bells remain still. They are not forgotten, they are simply not required. St. Nicholas returns on a night determined not by date, but by condition. Snow has fallen lightly throughout the day, fine and persistent, settling evenly across roofs and roads alike. The village glows warmly beneath it, lanterns and hearths offering quiet defiance against the cold. The air carries the mingled scents of pine, smoke, and bread prepared with care and shared without reluctance. This is a night that belongs to him. He arrives without announcement, moving through the village as he always has, unhurried, attentive, deliberate. Where he passes, warmth lingers just long enough to be noticed, then fades gently, leaving no trace to question. He pauses near the forest's edge. Beyond the last house, the trees wait. St. Nicholas does not speak at first. Words, in moments like this, serve little purpose. He listens instead, to the hush of falling snow, to the distant settling of branches under their burden, to the quiet steadiness of a world in balance. From the forest, the being steps forward. It emerges slowly, horns catching faint starlight as it crosses into open ground. Snow shifts beneath hooves placed with careful intent. Chains hang heavy but unmoving. The bells rest against them, silent. They regard one another across the boundary where village gives way to wild. There is no challenge in their stillness, no hostility, only recognition. St. Nicholas inclines his head, a gesture neither formal nor deferential, but acknowledging. The being mirrors it, not out of courtesy, but understanding. Their roles have never been opposed. They have simply been misunderstood when taken alone. Kindness and consequence, reward and reminder, light and shadow, neither complete without the other. The pact between them is not spoken. It does not require articulation. It exists as an understanding shaped over centuries, refined by necessity rather than agreement. When one grows too prominent, the other answers. When one recedes, the other advances. This winter, consequence had been neglected, and so it returned. St. Nicholas turns back toward the village, resuming his work without delay. The being remains where it stands, guarding the boundary rather than crossing it. Their paths do not intersect again that night, nor do they need to. Each fulfills their role independently, yet in concert. Children sleep deeply. Adults dream of warmth, of shared labor and careful words, of moments when patience is chosen over ease. They wake rested, calmer than they have been in many weeks. In the days that follow, small rituals shift almost imperceptibly. Parents linger when correcting children, explaining rather than dismissing. Children listen, not out of fear, but because limits have regained meaning. Neighbors offer help without resentment. Boundaries are respected without resentment. The bells remain silent, but they are no longer forgotten. Stories circulate quietly, told without embellishment. A figure seen at the edge of the forest. Bells that warn rather than threaten. A presence that walks only when invited by neglect. No name is given at first. Names define. and definition invites expectation. The elders prefer to let the story remain open, shaped by circumstance rather than declaration. Winter reaches its deepest point and begins its slow retreat. Days lengthen by minutes few notice. Snow grows heavier, wetter. Icicles drip steadily in the afternoons, marking time more reliably than any calendar. The being retreats higher into the mountains as the season softens. Not vanishing, but resting, watching from above, where the village appears small and contained, a cluster of warmth set against vast white slopes. Here the bells are tended carefully. Chains are checked, not in preparation for action, but in respect for readiness. Balance, after all, is not something to be hurried. St. Nicholas visits once more before winter loosens its hold entirely. This time he passes into the forest, following a narrow path that has not been walked in many years. Snow falls lightly, enough to mark his passage, but not enough to conceal it. The being waits where trees give way to stone. They stand together briefly, side by side, facing the village below. Smoke rises steadily from chimneys. Life continues. St. Nicholas speaks then, his voice low and measured. Not every year. The being inclines its head. It understands. It will walk when necessary. It will remain unseen when balance holds. Fear is a tool, not a ruler. It must never overstay its purpose. St. Nicholas turns away, his task complete. Snow closes behind him, erasing his tracks with gentle efficiency. The being remains. Winter continues its slow release. Snow melts. Paths widen. Streams remember how to move again. The village exhales, stretching back into the rhythm of seasons. The bells remain quiet through spring, through summer, through autumn. Children grow, adults age. Stories soften at their edges, passed down with care. The figure in the forest becomes a warning, then a reminder, then a legend recalled when nights grow long again. Some winters balance holds, other winters it does not. And when it falters, when kindness grows careless and consequence fades, the mountains remember. They always do. Snow gathers, bells are lifted, and fear, steady and restrained, prepares to walk once more. Chapter 4. Winter never truly abandons the mountains. It loosens its grip, certainly. It withdraws from roofs and roads, retreats from valleys and forests, and allows the land to remember other seasons. But it does not leave. It settles instead into stone and shadow, into the higher slopes where snow lingers long after it has vanished elsewhere. The village understands this, even if it does not often speak of it. Years pass. Children grow taller. Voices deepen. Hands that once reached upward now guide others forward. The rhythm of life continues, shaped by seasons that return in familiar sequence, each carrying echoes of the last. The story remains. It is told quietly at first, usually when winter deepens and the nights stretch long enough to invite reflection. The telling changes with each voice, as all stories do, but its shape remains intact. There was a winter when fear returned. There was a figure who walked. There were bells. And balance was restored. For many years afterward, the being is not seen. Not because it has vanished, but because it is not required. That, perhaps, is the truest measure of its success. Winters come and go. Some are gentle, marked by light snowfall and clear skies. Others press harder, testing patience and stores alike. Through them all, kindness and consequence remain in careful alignment, until, inevitably, they do not. It begins without drama. Life has grown comfortable. The village prospers. Paths are well maintained. Supplies are plentiful. The harsher lessons of earlier winters feel distant, almost unnecessary. Correcting a child seems inconvenient. Addressing a cruelty feels awkward. Allowing small things to pass feels easier. Fear fades again. Not entirely, but enough. Snow arrives earlier that year, not heavily, but persistently. Day after day, fine flakes settle and remain. The mountains grow quiet in a way that feels deliberate. Sounds carry less far. Nights deepen, lengthening beyond expectation. And then, one evening, as lanterns are lit and doors drawn closed, a sound moves through the forest. A bell. Slow, measured, unmistakable. This time, no one dismisses it as wind. Children are guided gently indoors. Voices soften without instruction. Fires are stoked and left to burn a little longer. Adults glance toward the tree line, hearts steady but attentive. The being does not enter the village that night, nor the next. It walks the forest's edge, its presence known but restrained. Hooves press into snow that seems eager to remember them. Chains shift with quiet weight. The bells ring only once each night, enough to remind, not to frighten. The effect is immediate. Small wrongs are corrected quickly. Harsh words are reconsidered before being spoken. Children sense accountability returning, not through fear of punishment, but through the certainty that actions matter. Balance returns without confrontation. The being withdraws again. And so the pattern holds. Years become decades. Decades become tradition. In time, the figure is given a name. It does not arrive all at once, nor is it agreed upon immediately. It takes shape gradually, formed by dialect and memory, by repetition softened through generations. The name carries weight without inviting familiarity. It is spoken rarely, and only when the season demands it. Krampus. The name matters less than what it signifies. Fear that walks only when invited. Fear that serves rather than rules. Fear that fades when its purpose is fulfilled. In the highest forests, where few humans walk and fewer still linger, the being rests between seasons. Snow gathers around it and melts again. Trees grow and fall. The mountains shift so slowly they appear unchanged. The bells remain, cleaned, silent, ready. St. Nicholas continues his path as well, year after year, leaving warmth and reward in careful measure. He never speaks of the being directly. He does not need to. Their roles are understood, bound by an agreement older than any village, older even than the stories themselves. Kindness shines more clearly when it is not alone. The last footprints of the season appear one dawn and vanish by midday. Snow melts, paths widen, life continues, and somewhere between memory and legend, between warning and comfort, the story settles back into quiet, waiting, as winter always does.